So the doors for our media center are going to be these shaker style flat panel doors, and these are very elegant and they'll go very well with the style of our media cabinet. So it consists of two stiles, two rails, and a center plywood panel. The joinery is pretty simple. Each of the rails and stiles has a 3/8 inch groove, and that 3/8 inch groove accommodates the center plywood panel. On the stiles, they also accommodate the stub tenons that are cut on the ends of the rails, and those fit into the grooves. And last but not least, for the center piece of plywood, we have a rabbeted edge, and this is so that the 1/2 inch piece of plywood can fit into the 3/8 inch groove. And the rationale behind sticking with the 3/8 inch groove instead of a 1/2 inch groove is that there's not too much material left over if I were to cut a 1/2 inch groove out of this 3/4 piece of stock. So it's a safer and structurally a better door if we were to just rabbet down the center piece of plywood. So I'll show you how to make the joinery and put this door together on the CMS router table. So I paid close attention when I was milling the lumber. So these are all, the rails and stiles are all grain matched. So I want to be careful to cut the groove on the right side. So I've made sure to make the mark, and this is going to be the good side up, and this is the edge that's going to receive the groove. So when I take this over to the router table, I can easily identify and I won't make any mistakes when I cut these. So the knobs on the CMS fence have two positions they can be in. Now this is, you can see these are pretty much close to the rear, and I can't push the fence out anymore. This is because for the last operation, the fence was out pretty far back, and so now we're going to have to shift this fence up more, closer to the bit. So I switched positions to the other hole, as you can see. And I'll just start adjusting it so that I can get a little closer. What I've done is marked a line to indicate the center of my rail here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the fence out until it's aligned with the center of the bit. And then I'll just lock the fence down. Now, even though I need this ultimate height to be 1 centimeter, I don't want to cut that much because this is a 3/8 inch bit, which is about 9.5 millimeters, and you don't want to take more than the diameter of the bit in one cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the bit just a little bit, and then I'll raise the bit and make a second pass. And the ensuing cut quality will be a lot better too this way. So with the fence and bit height set, I can set up this feather board now before I make the cut. Same as before, I'm loosening this knob here and applying gentle pressure to this vertical feather board. I'm going to tighten this guy down. Make sure there's just a little bit of resistance. If not, then push it down a little more. That seems okay. And then I'm going to push this guy, after loosening this knob, in towards my stock, making sure that there's just gentle pressure on there. And that's good to go. Alrighty, so it's time for us to go ahead and make the stub tenons as well as rabbet off the panels for our doors. I'm just going to take out this insert and I'm going to change the bit to a 1/2 inch straight bit. So it's important to remember to undo the switch on the router because otherwise the spindle you won't be able to undo this guy. That's just the way the router is designed. So now that we've got the bit in there, I'm going to use the pieces that we just cut to set the height of the bit. So for the first pass, we're going to do the face side. So I'm going to line up the top of the bit to the top of the groove and just check and make sure that it's not higher. And that looks okay, so we'll make our first pass with that height. So now I've set my square up to the depth of the groove that we just cut. And I'm going to use a square to set the distance of the fence away from the end of the bit. So in this position, the bit is at its most extended horizontal position. I'm going to position this square against the fence and just adjust the fence until the inside of the square touches the bit, and I'll tighten down the fence. Alright, now for some fun. Here's the sliding table that we're going to be using to help us cut the stub tenons. It's important to set the fence so that it's square to the sliding table's fence. I'll loosen these knobs here. That's going to allow this thing to pivot, and then I can set the angle of the fence with my square. And I need this to be perfect so that my tenons are cut correctly. Okay, and just lock those down. So what I did was intentionally leave one of my workpieces slightly longer. I can always cut it down later. I just wanted to check the bit height, and it's pretty easy to check if the height is set correctly, because what you really want is all the stock that's outside the groove to be removed on the ends. And that's going to form the tenon. So if I see that there's still a little piece here after cutting, that means I still have a little bit of height left to go to raise the bit up. So I'll set the height for the other side of the tenon using the same method. And I just want to get pretty close and then just under. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to just ease up to it. Just make sure I get it on exactly to how I want it. So then I'll make a test cut here first. And then we'll repeat it. And the router cable is totally unplugged right now, so I would advise doing the same thing when you're setting the bit height. So right now you can see I have the beginnings of a tenon, so I'll just use this. This is good enough so I can just test to fit, and then if it's okay I'll go ahead and cut the full length and repeat the same on all pieces. So the test fit reveals I'm in pretty darn good shape, so that's ready to go, and we can repeat this on all the pieces. Moment of truth. So let's see how it all fits together. Joint is just enough resistance. It's pretty tight and it won't come apart with easy pressure. You also don't want it too tight that you have to force it together. There we go. With the door frame ready to go, now it's time for me to set up the rabbet on the center panel. So you can see here, I need to rabbet away the difference between the diameter, the width of this groove and the thickness of this plywood. And that works out to be about 2.5 millimeters. So I'm going to take off half of that, which is 1.25 millimeters, off of each side of this plywood. So what I'm going to do is start out by taking really light passes and flipping it over. And I'll increase the bit height slowly until I get right here. So I've measured out 1 millimeter on this piece of scrap. I'm just going to raise a bit until I get just under that line. And that'll be my starting point. Now I keep the same distance for the fence because the amount that's going to be inside the groove is going to be exactly the same as the stub tenon. Still got a little bit of the ways to go. Now I have a door that's ready to assemble, so we'll go ahead and glue it up. Put some glue on this stub tenon here. Some good even coverage. And I'll put some inside the mating groove. And I'll just plop the insert in. The tenon can go on the end. So now we'll tighten up the parallel clamps. It's important not to over tighten the clamps. There's really no need to. You can only clamp it as far as the stub tenon wants to go into the groove. So there's already some mechanical strength there, so we don't want to run the risk of the panel bowing in the middle. Then you have a bowed door and then you got to start over again. So just enough, just sufficient pressure to keep it from opening up.